Hello everyone and welcome back. So this might come as a big surprise because I have never spoken about this before, but I am actually bi. Well, it's complicated. I guess I'm pan, I'm demi, I'm bi, I'm queer. I don't know. I don't really like labels. I'm a Gen Z. It's just not really my vibe. Let's just say that I'm a woman. I'm attracted to women. I'm attracted to men. I'm attracted to everybody. And I don't really like putting a label on it. But I guess if you had to choose a label, you could just pick one, reach into the hat, grab a label, and it probably fits me. Today, I want to explore the stigma surrounding bi women specifically, because we exist in this curious little nether space within the queer community where we often experience invalidation, erasure, and ostracization from the queer and straight communities. So today I want to explore the intersections between sexualization and stigma and how that affects bi women, and also how this manifests in our culture. So let's get into it. I want to preface this by saying that I have always felt a lot of discomfort regarding my attraction to women. Like, even when I was a child, I had this almost debilitating fear of other people knowing that I was attracted to women because I was afraid of being perceived as that creepy, predatory lesbian. You know, that stereotype that's existed since the beginning of time? It's so funny that now people are trying to make a big deal about trans women in bathrooms, oh, we need to protect the lesbians, and I'm like, it was not even 10 years ago, to this day, that I was 10 years old and in a changing room with other women being absolutely terrified of looking at another woman because I didn't want another woman to think that I liked them. I know, the horror. My whole life, I've always kind of felt like a monster simply because I'm attracted to the wrong gender. I've always felt deviant, disgusting, degenerate, or almost inhuman simply because I'm attracted to women. And for this reason, it's always kind of just been easier for me to pretend that I'm straight and enter relationships with men and put my attraction to women on the back burner. But as I got older, it became really difficult to continue ignoring it. And yes, definitely a huge part of this has to do with internalized homophobia and internalized biphobia. But there's also another layer to this that I don't see as many people acknowledging. And that is the way that sexualization of bisexuality can really manifest in discomfort for bi women. I think we've all seen it, that narrative that bi women are just having little fun, just a little casual experimentation. It's a cool and sexy fun thing to do at a party, especially to get male attention. And yes, I will say that it is so important to experiment. I think that everyone should honestly experiment with their gender presentation and with their sexuality. Otherwise, you could end up in your 50s realizing that you have spent half of your life in unfulfilling relationships and just feel empty and miserable when you realize that, oh wait, I could have been with women the whole time. And I don't want anyone to be in that situation. So yeah, totally experiment. But also, bisexuality is not just an experiment. It's not a tool, it's not a trick, and it's not a fetish. It's literally just the way that some people are. And I don't know why I have to say that in 2021. So one of the first things that I want to get out of the way right off the bat is the meaningless discourse surrounding whether or not it's transphobic to be bisexual. The short answer is no, but we're going to go more into the history of it because I like being complicated. Also, there's a bisexual tangent incoming, so just bear with me for a couple minutes. Basically, there's this discourse in the queer community about whether or not bi or pan are the same thing, and whether or not it's transphobic to identify as bi, because some people say that bisexual is just men and women, and therefore it excludes trans and non-binary people. Now, that's just not the case, and my source is literally Michael Page, the original creator of the bi flag, who is an openly bisexual activist, and also every queer organization ever, and also the dictionary. The original creator of the bi pride flag, Michael Page, used influence from another existing symbol within the bi community, the bi-angles. The bi-angles were a series of triangles that were overlapping. One was pink, one was blue, and the middle one that overlapped was lavender. The pink triangle is a reference to the symbol that was used to oppress and label gay people during the Holocaust, and lavender was already a very significant color within the Wooloo community. Wooloo stands for women loving women, and also it sounds like a Pokemon, which is a win-win in my book. Violets historically have been a symbol of love that girlfriends would exchange with each other during times when they could not openly be gay, and the McCarthy-era's Lavender Scare legally enforced the purging of gay people from government. And also in 1969 and 1970, lavender sashes were used as lesbians fought for inclusion under feminism. This is a really brief history of queer history and also how color has played a role in queer liberation. I just wanted to note that because I think it's interesting, and I also do think it's relevant to bisexual history. It's important to know what these colors mean and also how they have played a role in our history. So the blue, pink, and purple colors that are used in the bi flag represent attraction to your gender, other genders, and both. Also, I want to note that non-binary identity is not just a third gender option. It's not just like male, female, and other, and then non-binary is like one thing. Non-binary is an umbrella term for a series of different identities. Like, I'm not even gonna label all of them because I don't want to leave anyone out. I'm just saying that it is actually very complicated, and within non-binary identity, there are people who are AFAB, AMAB, people who are intersex, people who identify as trans, people who don't identify as trans. There are people who are taking hormones, people who are medically transitioning, and people who aren't. All are valid, and I'm not trying to say that it's a monolith. It's a very wide range of experiences. And I did want to note that, like, I'm just not going to go super deep into non-binary identity in this video because it's very complicated, and I also can't speak for non-binary people because I myself am not non-binary. I also want to note that pansexuality is a slightly different label that, in my opinion, means essentially the same thing. I identify as bi, I identify as pan, I use them interchangeably, but there is a slight linguistical difference. Basically, the difference is bisexuality is attraction to your gender and other genders, and pansexuality is attraction to people regardless of gender. So ultimately, it ends up meaning largely the same thing. It's mostly just a personal preference which label people decide to use. Also, neither are transphobic, both are valid, both are fine, and it's really not worth fighting about. Okay, so bada bing, bada boom, that's a little bit of bisexual history. Basically, bisexuality is not transphobic. Thank you so much for coming to my TED Talk. As a bi woman, I've gone through many different phases and levels of comfort with my sexuality. I've gone through periods where I feel almost disgusted with myself to the extent where I can barely even look at other women, and I reject that I'm attracted to them at all. And yes, a big part of this does have something to do with internalized homophobia and biphobia, which I am working on, but also there's a very real part of me which feels disgusted at the fact that other people, strangers, will look at my sexuality as a performance or something that I do to titillate men. And the fact that my sexuality is reduced to a fetish for other people, especially strangers, is something that still makes me extremely uncomfortable, especially as someone who does also identify as ace. So it's difficult to say exactly why this is such a thing, but it definitely is a pervasive thing in our culture. Like, open up any dating site nowadays and scroll around for like a couple minutes, especially if you're a woman looking for other women. You are going to find at least 17 profiles for women looking for other women to spend the night with her and her partner. And I'm not even saying that this is necessarily a bad thing, and I'm not saying that all women who are looking for this are doing it solely because they are coerced by their partner to enter these kinds of relationships. In fact, one of my closest friends was actually looking for that for herself, like that's what she wanted, and her boyfriend was the one who didn't want that. And they actually ended up breaking up over it because he was like convinced that bi people are inherently going to cheat and that they're untrustworthy, which is also super gross. But I feel like it's also really weird because I've met so many bi women who say that they have been pressured or coerced by their partners to be okay with that kind of dynamic. It's like, if you're a bi woman these days, and you want to be in a relationship, you have to be okay with that specific dynamic, which is kind of weird because not everyone's poly, not everyone's okay with non-monogamy, and that has to be okay. So maybe it's the lack of a perceived threat that bisexuality poses to the hetero norm. When we look at bisexuality like it's something that's just done in the bedroom, we reduce it and see it as something that is inherently less serious or less of a real relationship, you know, like a hetero one. There's also the fact that I feel like a lot of men kind of just want to sleep around and they want to have the opportunity to do that freely. And this relationship dynamic allows them to be in a monogamous relationship but still see other women. Because of the way that compulsory heterosexuality manifests in our culture, we see relationships that feature two women as less secure and less serious, whereas a male-male-female dynamic would put the man on the defensive, in danger of being dethroned. Compulsory heterosexuality, or comphet, is the idea that heterosexuality is the natural and default role that is required of women in order for them to exist within a patriarchal society. It was first proposed by Adrienne Rich, and it's been widely studied in the fields of sociology for a really long time now. I didn't even come close to scratching the surface in this video because it's very complicated and I don't really have time to get into it, but if you want to see a video, just like bully me in the comments until I do a video on comphet and Adrienne Rich, because it's honestly fascinating. I think many men want to be the voyeur for something that's unconventional and taboo, but they also don't want to invalidate their power or sexuality. Basically, they don't want to venture too far from the mainstream, but they also don't want to get cucked. So I think for many straight men, watching another man and a woman, especially in the flesh, is a big no-no. But because of the existing stigma surrounding queerness, they can watch girl on girl because it's fun and sexy and it's a deviation, but it still doesn't challenge the heteronormative status quo. Except for the two women, but like, we've already discussed that. But I also want to talk about my own issues regarding relationships with other women. Why don't I feel safe being in a relationship with a woman? And why do so many bi women seek out het-passing relationships? Well, a huge factor in this is the general stigma around queer relationships. And I'm not even talking about like the right to marriage or people throwing things at you in the street. I'm talking about the microaggressions, the subtle things, the ways that people will give you side-eye glances when you say you have a girlfriend, or the way that people don't ever truly believe that you actually are bi. You know, it's the fact that I've come out to certain members of my family multiple times and explained to them in graphic detail what it means to be bi. Not like the sexual stuff, but like how it feels, how I experience the world. And they all but put their fingers in their ear and refuse to listen to me. You know, it's the subtle things. Also, the inherent sexual nature a lot of people project onto queer relationships makes me and a lot of other queer people extremely uncomfortable. Like, think of the fact that when you find out someone's gay, a lot of people just will think it's okay to ask you extremely personal questions about your intimacy. People do the same thing to trans women and trans men. They'll just come up and say, hey, are you post-op or pre-op? And then you'll say, this isn't the conversation starter you think it is, Karen, and then you walk away. It's honestly embarrassing. I don't understand why people do that. Cis people, stop embarrassing me. But I feel like this is also a unique thing that happens a lot within the bi women experience, where a lot of people view your relationship almost as a sexual commodity that they can consume. A lot of men see you as a sexual object and as a sexual option, because as a bi woman, you potentially could be into a man, meaning you could be into that man, meaning he can project his fantasies onto you in your relationship. And as an ace woman, as an ace bi woman, that makes me so incredibly, so profoundly uncomfortable. Oh my god. I also don't think it's ridiculous for bi women to fear for their safety, especially considering that rates of SA are astronomically high for bi women compared to other types of women. For example, 61% of bi women have been assaulted, stalked, or physically abused by an intimate partner versus the 44% of lesbians or the 35% of straight women. In every single category, bi women were cited as being more likely to have been abused, SA'd, victims of CSA. They were more likely to be stalked, harassed, or otherwise mistreated by intimate partners or by strangers. And I'm not even saying this because I'm saying that bi women are more oppressed than lesbians, or more oppressed than straight women, or that they are better, or in any way, shape, or form that they are like, you know, above other types of women. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that this trend does correlate to the sexualization, and even though I don't think it's the cause, I do think there's a connection there. And I don't think you can blame bi women for being very aware of this connection, especially because it does relate to the sexual abuse that we do experience at higher rates. I fear that being viewed as a sexual commodity without my control or consent will make me the victim of violence. And I also feel a lot of guilt because of that fear, because that fear makes it difficult for me to pursue relationships with women, and it makes it really hard for me to be able to visualize myself being in a serious long-term relationship with a woman, because I fear that that relationship would make me the target of abuse. And that makes me feel like an imposter that doesn't actually belong in the queer community, because I feel like, what if I'm not actually bi? What if I'm not actually attracted to women? What if all the women I've ever fallen in love with was just an elaborate ruse so that I can trick myself into thinking I actually belong in this community? It's really sad the level of erasure and gaslighting that a lot of bi women go through regarding their identities, and it also really sucks that both straight people and a lot of people in the queer community look at us like we don't belong in either. Like, this is definitely something that I am working on, but I also do think that I'm not the only bi woman who has ever gone through these feelings. I don't think I'm the only bi woman to have experienced this, and I also don't feel like this is something a lot of people talk about because there's a lot of shame, and a lot of bi people feel like they're treading on thin ice and like they're on the verge of getting kicked out of the community because they don't actually belong. Like, you have to have a resume of like 40 different women that you have been attracted to or had a relationship with. Otherwise, you don't truly belong in the community, which is weird because we don't really do that with lesbians. We don't do that with gay men. We don't, I mean, shitty people do, but most people don't look at people in the queer community and say, oh, well, you have to prove it to us. You have to prove that you actually belong. They just accept them. But I feel like with bi people, it's just a normal thing that we're just expected to prove we're a member of the community by showing a certain amount, by meeting the quota. And that kind of sucks. So while the sexualization of bisexuality can look like acceptance on the surface, I don't think it actually is. I think it's actually a form of erasure, and I think it actually forces a lot of bi women back into the closet and makes them fearful of their identities. It further otherizes and stigmatizes bisexuality and makes it seem like it's a deviant sexual behavior that you do, not a way that you love people or not a reflection on who you love. And I also just think it's a terrible thing to do. Like, we don't do this with straight people. We do this with gay people too, but not to the extent that it happens with bisexuality. And I don't think that this is truly the acceptance that the media is trying to frame it like it is. Obviously, this is a really complicated topic, and it's really difficult to understand. I also do want to acknowledge that I'm just one individual and my opinions and my thoughts are just my own. They do not represent the entire bisexual community, and I also don't pretend that they would. I tried to get different perspectives, and I did do a lot of research. I actually spent like 2 or 3 weeks working on this video. So I did try to understand other people's perspectives on this, but also my thoughts are my own, and I do want to be upfront about that. I also would love to hear what you guys think about this, especially if you have a different opinion than me. Regardless of how you identify or what your orientation is, I would still love to hear your thoughts. Why do you think society sexualizes female queerness so much? And why do you think so many women enter het-passing relationships? I would love to know what you guys think, even if you disagree with me. Also, I just want to say thank you so much for watching this video. This has been a passion project of mine for several weeks now, and so I really appreciate you watching it. Also, I just want to say that if you enjoyed this video or found anything that I said to be especially interesting, then don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and also subscribe to this channel so you get notified every single time I post a video. Thank you guys so much for watching this. I really appreciate that. Thank you to all of the people who have subscribed to this channel. Thank you to all of the people who watch this video, and also thank you especially to every single person who is supporting me over on my Patreon. I really appreciate you guys, and I hope all of you have a wonderful week, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye everyone!